Well, tributes are pouring in for the late South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who died on Saturday. President Trump calling the Republican mainstay a friend who worked hard and was loved by everybody. Senator Graham was 71 years old. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-host, Harris Faulkner, and also joining us today, Cheryl Casoni, Fox Business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business, Alicia Acuna, Fox News senior correspondent, and Paul Morrow, attorney, retired NYPD inspector, and Fox News contributor. Now, the medical examiner's preliminary report says that the senator suffered an aortic dissection due to cardiovascular disease. Graham was first elected to the House as part of the 1994 Republican Revolution before moving up to the Senate in 2003. South Carolina's other senator, Tim Scott, weighed in on his legacy.
We all miss him dearly, and he's irreplaceable in the Senate. He bridged the gap with Republicans, and sometimes he even built a bridge for the Republicans in the Senate and the president. When there were disagreements, he would be the guy that would bring all of us together. But as a person, I just miss my friend.
President Trump has ordered flags to fly at half-staff across the nation in the senator's honor. He called into Fox and Friends this morning and had this to say about Graham's ability to reach across the aisle.
He was a great guy, and he was a friend. He would call me all the time. He would just I'd say, "Stop calling me, Lindsey." It was amazing. He just didn't stop, and he was a worker. He was a total workaholic politician. Now, some people don't call that work. Some people call that a lot of talking. But everybody loved him. He was good on the other side. If I had Democrat problems, he could solve them. He was a man of all different abilities, actually, and he was a nice man.
Several Democratic senators paying their respects. Virginia's Mark Warner writing, Graham never lost his ability to connect. Massachusetts' Elizabeth Warren saying, Graham was always willing to negotiate with humor and wit. And Minnesota's Amy Klobuchar adding, it was about his love for the world. Several world leaders have chimed in as well. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that the senator stood in defense of democracy. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz adding simply, I will miss him. And Ukrainian President Zelensky mourning that America and the world have lost a determined leader. The day before he passed, Senator Graham concluded what would be his final foreign policy mission, visiting Ukraine with a fierce call to end the war. He said he was optimistic and reportedly told another senator, this is a big deal. We all did good. The Wall Street Journal editorial board calling his passing a loss for global freedom. Harris, he also served 33 years in the United States Air Force and National Guard and retired in 2015 as a colonel. And his service, I think, just remains too big to even capture in a moment.
You know, Senator Graham, the times that I met him, saw him at McCain's funeral, and talked with him on my programs, interviewing him over the years, he loved a debate. Like, you had to be ready to talk to this man. And he loved to prove that he knew what he needed to know to win an argument, but he was willing to listen to both sides. And I think that's why he had so many friends on the Hill. I know we had on former Vice President Prince last hour, and he talked about that military background too. And he said his most memorable moments with Graham were being with troops, were being with those men and women. Oh no, go ahead.
We have that actually. Let's just play,
and
then we can get your thoughts on the other side, guys. Take a watch.
I've got a heavy heart this morning, because Senator Lindsey Graham was an American patriot. He was a matchless voice for freedom. I have to tell you that some of my favorite memories with Lindsey Graham were simply being with him, mingling with troops. He not only wore the uniform, some 30 years Air Force and Air Force Reserves, but he spoke the language, and he was a fierce advocate for the men and women of our armed forces.
I love that. Yeah, I didn't know you had a little clip of him, so that's great. Look, you know, to serve the country, you've got to understand everybody in it and love them as Americans. I mean, that was the reputation that Senator Graham had. So just knowing how much he loved America, wanted to serve her in so many different ways, I think it's a good lesson to young people today that, you know, if you love the country, find a way to show it.
Indeed. And Paul, I know many clips are circulating of the late senator's incredible contributions on the Hill and in media and the like, and interpersonal connections. And one of them during Justice Kavanaugh's contentious hearings, where he stood up for the integrity of the process and called out, you know, what had been up until that point friends among the senator ranks, where he sort of blew it wide open. And many people point to that as a hallmark of his moral integrity that was not only never pierced, but was always just head and shoulders above so many others there on the Hill.
Yeah, accurate, I believe. You know, it's compared often to that moment in the 50s and the McCarthy hearings when Roy Cohn and McCarthy were asked, do you have no decency? That will be imprinted indelibly in American history, and it was Graham that did it. I think it points to the fact that history very often, more than we consider, turns on the actions of great people, people that really rise to the occasion. And it's because he had such an affable manner and had established himself as somebody who was even keel, who would listen to both sides, who could negotiate, that he had the purchase to do that. When the chips were down, he felt that that was a grave injustice. And I think he backed down a lot of people because they said, wow, I've never seen him like that. I know I never had. I would make a couple of points real quick. The second thing I would say is just, you know, when something like this happens, it ends up as an X-ray of who people really are. And you can see the people out there who are reacting, I think, appropriately, and the people who are not. I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to do what they do. But I think there are people who are in public life who really should check themselves because they haven't acted appropriately. And I think it's shameful. And then lastly, I would just say the reason this hits so hard is because we live in a different era. When I was a kid, would I know, even, you know, as a young adult reading the newspaper pre-internet, who the South Carolina senators were? Of course I wouldn't. But in the age of social media, we feel we know these people. And you see them regularly. You see the X feed. You see them on whatever social media. You know, you get to know them in a way that normally you would know maybe somebody lives a few blocks from you, or a cousin you don't see that often. I think that's why it hits so hard, because in a certain way, well, you know him in a way that in a previous era we feel like we wouldn't. And so that's why I think it feels a little bit like a death in the family. Yeah.
And Cheryl, I want to fold into the conversation what the president posted on Truth Social, which is essentially what's next. We can pop it up, then we'll let you. Here we go. So this is the president saying that I recommend to Governor Henry McMaster that Lindsey Graham's wonderful sister Darline to serve as interim senator from the great state of South Carolina. He writes, this would be a fabulous tribute to Lindsey, who loved her dearly. And all who knew the senator's story knew just how much he loved her. He raised her as his own, adopted her when their parents passed away when they were young children. And I think he would, I am confident he is smiling down from heaven at this. Your thoughts on either the senator or this next?
I think that it's a wonderful path forward, you know, because Senator Graham, I mean, he chaired the House, the Budget Committee, one of the most powerful committees, really, if you think about it, on the Hill and the Senate. I had Senator Bill Hagerty on with me this morning on Fox Business, and he just said, we've just lost our friend. He said, but we've got to continue the work. And he made very clear to me this morning that there were several pieces of legislation they've got to get through. This seat will now be filled by his sister. I think it's a wonderful choice to have his sister there. I mean, you're right. I think he's looking down from heaven, and he's so proud. At the same time, he had such a great victory. He was in Ukraine on Friday, and the Trump administration, he got the support. There was some back and forth. They got the support for them to put more sanctions on Russia. He was such a cheerleader for the Ukrainians, for President Zelensky, and he felt great. You know, and the president talked about it. He's like, I was on the phone with him just right before he passed away. You know, like you can hear the president saying, I have lost a friend and a confidant. But you hear that from so many people. Senator Scott saying the same thing. So you hear that mutual respect. But the work is going to continue. She will be a part of that now. And I have to say it, I can't wait to see her on the Senate floor and to see her just, taking on the work of her brother. And my heart breaks for her to have lost her brother this way. But certainly it's, I think it's the right decision.
And certainly I think, the machine that is our government, the country keeps running and has to keep running. So while the world is mourning this moment, everyone is also appreciating that the work has to be done, and therefore it's sort of like we take a beat and then move forward. And certainly I think there's no greater honor to the senator's memory than to keep moving forward and getting some good things accomplished for the country.
Absolutely, and in his name. And the question is, who is it in the Senate who can do this and move things the way that Lindsey Graham could? And Paul, you just said something that really sticks with my heart when you said it feels like we knew him from watching him. I never met him, but he was someone who carried himself in public life in a way that was fierce and hilarious, and that he's one of those people where you watch and you feel like, I wish I knew him. Yeah. I would love to sit next to him one day. Ainsley Earhart talked on Sunday about sitting next to him at a state dinner for the royal family. She said the two of them both said, I'm so glad I'm sitting next to you. But anybody who sat next to him would walk away feeling smarter and happier, and also hilarious. And I think it is so telling. Lindsey Graham held a very specific and unique place in the history of the Senate. And I think it's so telling that Democrats, some of his fiercest adversaries, had some of the best stories to tell about him. They fought. They were at loggerheads all of the time, and they did it publicly, loudly, and sometimes kind of mean, both sides. But they had some of the best things to say about him. That says so much.
Yeah. Real quickly, I've been messaging back and forth between Senator Tim Scott. 4 p.m. today will be when Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina, makes the decision and announcement. Tim Scott, the senator, will be in Columbia, he says, but we don't know exactly what McMaster will do yet. So, you heard from the president from what Emily reported. So we'll see what happens next, 4 p.m. Eastern.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.